welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbul with you at PTP World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two top stories. The first is in reference to the joint session of the parliament that was addressed by the President of Pakistan. And this is, of course, the first time that we've had a joint sitting of the parliament since the 8th of October, 8th of February elections earlier this year. And this is especially, of course, important given the kind of political uncertainty that Pakistan, unfortunately, had been facing for quite some time now and has continued to do so. And, of course, the economic challenges that the country is currently also tackling. The President, Asif Ali Zardari, has addressed the parliament 6 times before as well. And this is something that is important in particular with reference to the government that is in place at the moment and the responsibilities of the different political parties, and also the call that the President himself has made at the floor of the House, asking for politics of reconciliation and dialogue to prevail and for polarization in the country to end. And of course, he's also stressed upon the importance of working relationships and positive relationships as integral to the country's progress. And so this is, of course, something that we'll be focusing more on in the discussion as well, trying to understand what impact will this particular address have and how will this be a unifying force for the different political parties. Of course, we saw that the Sunni Ittihad Council, or the former PTI, also was part of this session and also staged a protest. There was a lot of sloganeering with regards to the allegations of rigging in elections, the supremacy of the constitution and the government. And so we're going to be taking a look at what exactly will then be the move forward, especially when we talk about the importance of parliament in a democratic setup and how strengthening this institution is one of the topmost priorities for the country to move ahead. So that's going to be our first segment. Our next one is going to take a look at the issue of terrorism, particularly the threat emanating from Afghanistan and from the lack of action on Afghanistan's their commitments of protecting its own soil to be used against any other territory. This time, of course, this has also been echoed by the US, who has said that it's supporting Pakistan's fight against terrorism and is in continuous conversation with its partners and allies, including Pakistan and the Pakistani stakeholders, with regards to what is happening on ground and the kind of intelligence sharing that Pakistan has done before as well, calling again to the Afghan Taliban regime to uphold their commitments, saying that if they want the international integrity and recognition, then they'll have to fulfill their commitments that were made earlier, and also urge them to stop the terrorists from using their soil against any other territory. And what exactly will this mean for Pakistan's fight against terrorism on ground, and what sort of support will be extended by the US is something we'll explore further. And what will this amount to in terms of the US's own relationship with Afghanistan, is to emphasize once again that they're going to judge the Afghan Taliban based on what they do. So that's going to be our focus in segment 2 of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farooq Patafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment, we've been joined online by Ms. Nayab Jan, who's leader PPP, and Daniel Sheikh, leader PMLN. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Daniel Saab, let me start with you, given the fact that, of course, when we take a look at the government and the PMLN's role, it's extremely important in terms of how the cabinet has been formed, who the prime minister is, and, of course, the support of the different political parties, including the PPP that was there in the previous tenure as well, and that continues to be part of the current setup as well. What did you make of the address of the president in the joint session today, particularly among the issues that he's highlighted, the talks and dialogue and the importance of reconciliation that he has emphasized? Do you think that this can result in a unifying force for the different members of the parliament?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. Yes, and I believe it's the speculations that some people had that the federal government cannot stand without the support of PPP. So a lot of people had these apprehensions in their mind that they might not get that positive support, especially considering the fact that PPP party is not part of the federal government and they haven't taken any ministries. So it's definitely a very good sign. And now it's up to PMLN to perform.
Right. I just want to correct myself as well. I was in no way implying that the PMLN cannot run without PPP support. I was just asking your opinion on the matter. But I'm sure this may have been coming in from other sources too. But Nayab, I'll come to you. Of course, the president is representing the Pakistan People's Party. But of course, what he wanted to say on the House is that he's representing much more than that as well. But in terms of actually translating that into what will transpire, how will different individual political leaders actually respond to this call? Will this actually strengthen the role that the parliament can play in the politics of Pakistan? What expectations do you have, and what do you think will be put forward by the leadership?
Well, I think that the most important thing is that the issue that the president of Pakistan has identified, which is that currently Pakistan is, there's a lot of political polarization, there's a lot of hyper partisanship in Pakistan right now. So I think the first thing is that the issue identification is spot on, because I think as a society, as a polity, we are extremely polarized. And for any democracy, to move forward, we do need the politics of reconciliation to come in. And that's where the second part of your question comes in, because my expectations, of course, are very high, because President Zardari has a spectacular track record when it comes to the politics of reconciliation and of strengthening the parliament. I mean, he made history, as the only president who gave his powers to the parliament. He made history as somebody who strengthened the federation by passing getting, the reconciliatory process that led to the passing of the 18th Amendment. And he, is famously known as somebody who takes on all different points of view, takes on, doesn't have a reactionary or retaliatory approach. And that's exactly what we saw today in Parliament. I think it was a very measured, mature response amid a lot of unnecessary chaos that the opposition created. And he was able to keep his cool, which he's obviously known for doing at several occasions. And he was able to put forward exactly what, the president of Pakistan, and not somebody who is hyper partisan, should put forward, which is that we all need to work together, which is that all parties need to reflect and think about Pakistan first, and that we need to strengthen the parliament and we need to strengthen democracy. So I think expectations are very high given his track record.
Who exactly do you have expectations from?
I think the expectations from the president himself in terms of the role that he can play as somebody who, the vision that he has to bring this sort of reconciliatory approach. And then, of course, I think given the Pakistan People's Party's track record, we saw in the electoral campaign as well that there were messages of reconciliation, there were messages of ending hatred and division and polarization in society. And I do think that, there are positive sort of signs that the two major parties will be able to work together, and that all major stakeholders will be able to end this, or at least try to reduce this hyper partisanship.
Yeah, Daniel, when we talk about obviously reconciliation right now, of course, we know that there is one party, Sunni Ittihad Council. Of course, that is ultimately we are talking about PTI itself. That party is, of course, is being considered as the cause of the polarization right now. When we say that the politics of reconciliation can be activated and is desired by the President of Pakistan, and of course, he will be having support of the ruling party, leading ruling party PMLN as well. Can we say that when we talk about reconciliation, it is to reconcile with the opposition, the actual opposition sitting on the opposition benches?
Faisal Saab, after looking at their role today, to reconcile or talk to somebody, there has to be some sort of reasoning. On the side of Sunni Tariq, at least in the past few months that they've been in parliament, I have not seen any sort of maturity or reasoning. So I don't think it's going to be easy dealing or tackling with them. And nor do they stand on any political issues. Their issues are completely different. And nor do they talk about logic or reasoning. So bringing them on a table and talking to them will not be too easy.
Right now, I'm glad earlier you talked about how the expectation is from the president himself, because we spoke to another senior leader of PPP on our show as well when we talked about how the leadership of PPP does talk about politics of reconciliation and puts out these calls. But what about actual action towards this goal, and what sort of measures is the party taking to actually fulfill that? To which he responded that if requested, the PPP will play its role when it can. But there is no initiative that is going to be taken from the PPP. What do you think of that?
I think that we have to measure things according to what past precedent has been. I think whenever there have been times of hyperpartisanship, the Pakistan People's Party has played a vital role in bringing all stakeholders together, whether it is for sort of monumental legislative measures, like I mentioned, the 18th Amendment in itself was an exercise in bringing together multiple stakeholders amid another sort of divided time. Other than that, we can see that in the 16-month government, it was the Pakistan People's Party that took the initiative of starting the all parties conference and did start dialogues with other parties. Even at this critical juncture, it was the Pakistan People's Party that said, because we want to see continuity in parliamentary affairs, it is why we are, joining this government. And we also sort of extended a little bit of an olive branch to the former PTI. So I do think that there have been signs throughout. We have excellent precedent when it comes to, holding talks with different stakeholders, of course, provided that they respond adequately. We can't force anybody to respond. But I think that the maturity of sort of not resorting to reactionary politics, that in itself speaks volumes.
Right. Farooq, in terms of what we've seen so far with different political parties, the statements that they're making, that the actions that they're taking, do you see any political party being actually serious about dialogue?
Right. Thank you very much, Sana. I wanted to actually start with a qualifier. When earlier you said that he's representing People's Party, I just wanted to point out that at least on books, a president represents the entire country. So it means that whether you like him or not, whether you're protesting in the parliament, he is your president as well. Now, regarding reconciliation, honestly, had there been any scope of reconciliation, I'm sure that it would have been PTI that would have been in power right now. They have repeatedly shown you, especially when Imran Khan Sahab was removed from power. After that, continuously they have been, fighting whosoever was in power, right? And they have actually dug this ditch up to the extent that they are totally isolated. So I don't think that it is prudent to expect that there is going to be any dialogue in coming days or that soon. But that doesn't mean that while you cannot reconcile the impossible sides, you can't actually find a way to work around those disagreements. For example, in coming days, we are going to see some very major economic reforms, right? And that is going to actually have the support of legislative reforms as well. So you'll be needing Parliament, all hands on deck, to actually work with the government to ensure that those reforms are actually accepted. In that situation, of course, there will be need of some kind of support from the opposition side as well. So initially, when Asif Ali Zardari Sahab was being nominated for the post, we were told that he has given himself this task of finding common ground with all disparate forces. My humble submission is that even then it is going to be an uphill task. Remember that Asif Ali Zardari is one of the strongest presidents, or civilian presidents in recent history. Why? Because his party is also supporting, the current government from without, not within, right? So any time there is a disagreement with him or the government, he can, remove his support. And what happens then? Do you think that PTI is going to try to save this government? No, right? So it is essential that People's Party and PMLN work in tandem, and they're going to. So in coming days, I think that his influence is going to grow. But whether you expect that PTI will listen to reason right now, I don't think they are in a state to do so, because A, their leader is behind bars, and without that leader, nobody has the kind of leadership, entitlement, so to speak, to actually call shots and decide on behalf of that ex-prime minister. And that leader who is behind the bars is in a reactionary mode. So I don't think there's going to be huge dialogue or reconciliation per se.
Right. So, Mr. Daniel, when we talk about the Sunni Ittihad Council or the PTI, and I understand the alliance that has been called the TTAP has also put forward its own stance, including the PTI and others, and they've of course talked about protesting all over the country. And while we talk about politics of reconciliation, we can talk about PTI, but there are other political parties as part of this alliance as well. What is the PMLN strategy moving forward? Is it to ignore the protests? Is it to deal with whatever is being put forward, especially in terms of allegations of rigging in elections? Or is it to somehow bring them within this parliamentary structure and actually involve them in the discussions?
Sana, before going there, I would like to comment on the president's speech when he talks about reconciliation, or he talked about reconciliation. This is my opinion. This is not a fact, but I feel that he meant reconciliation with the other stakeholders or the other people in Pakistan, especially in Balochistan, who and people and other political leaders. I don't think he was referring towards PTI. And as far as their protest is concerned, the way Patafi Sahib just said, I don't think, especially with their leader not being behind bars, I don't think they'll be able to make a big difference. And as long as they don't create a law and order situation, I think government is going to show maximum restraint. But in case if they do, then obviously they'll have to be dealt with according to the law. But I don't see them as a major threat, especially in the coming days, because it's too soon.
And by the way, let me ask you a question which is based on conjecture. If Maulana Fazlur Rahman is going to join PTI in protesting, do you think that the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, being the arch rival of Maulana, who has actually defeated him, do you think that he is going to be on board? He is already criticizing the man. So how does it work? Does TTAP actually work in tandem?
Patafi Sahib, this is very interesting, not just like even as far as the working relationship with the KP government is concerned, that's going to be very, very different from the other people in PTI. So basically, right now, PTI is divided in not two factions, but actually many factions. And the government in KPK will definitely want to reconcile with the federal government, but the other elements who want to protest or who are not in some part of the power corridors, they want to go on the streets. So I don't think that
sorry to cut you, but I'm not, hang on. I'm not asking whether the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government is going to reconcile with the federal government. I'm asking whether the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa will be able to reconcile with Maulana Fazlur Rahman, or whether we are going to see the charge being led by Maulana, in which PTI has only nominal support or presence.
But my answer to that is, if Maulana was getting any, if his situation was favorable for his protests in KPK, he would have threatened to start his protests from Peshawar. Rather, he's threatening to start from Lahore, where already the government is. Had he started from Peshawar, and then he would be stopped on the Attak bridge, and he would be able to build a much stronger tempo. And KPK is Maulana's stronghold, but he knows he's not going to get any facilitation from the KPA government. This is my opinion.
Right, Faisal, what we've heard from Mr. Daniel seems that that whatever the opposition is putting forward as a front doesn't seem to amount much in their opinion. And I want your perspective on that as well, especially when we take a look at the politics of Pakistan, especially in the past year or so, the kind of uncertainty that has been in place. And then, of course, right now, also the challenges that the new government faces, along with the economic challenges that we're facing as well. Do you also agree that the opposition at the moment is not really something that is a cause of concern?
Sana, when we talk about cause of concern, of course, opposition is a cause of concern in the current circumstances. When we talk about inflation in place, when we talk about, of course, very difficult decisions which are being made by the government in terms of course, putting economy back on track, and economic stability requires political stability as well. And at that time, if we are talking about the political instability in terms of course, TTAP coming on the roads once more, of course it is a trouble, and for the government, especially for the interior minister as well. So when we talk about KPK, and earlier of course you have highlighted role of Maulana Fazlur Rahman, and how PTI, of course, Sunni Ittihad Council has played in KPK. I think it was a sort of very smart move from Sunni Ittihad Council's government in KPK. Reason being, first of all, they have safeguarded their own backyard and their own government, because they have a very strong government in KPK. What they have wanted to do is that before somebody starts sort of have a go against that provincial government, they have sorted their ways out with that leadership, and they have actually extended a hand of joining them, so that they can join the whole forces and come against the federal itself.
Then Faisal, they chose the CM who is actually antithetical to Maulana, who actually made a statement about Maulana, because Maulana is also getting reserved seats at the cost of Sunni Tariq.
Yeah, Farooq, you are right about it, but at the same time,
how do you bargain this?
At the same time,
how do you bargain this? In coming days, how can any protest cause that kind of concern for the government? Okay, what can it do?
And
Farooq, when somebody from Maulana Fazlur Rahman's side knows that the calls won't be made by CM of KPK, rather the actual of course calls would be made from somewhere else, then of course he's okay with it. No matter they had an very rough election earlier, but of course it won't matter at all.
Chief Minister Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, just a question, follow-up question. Chief Minister Khyber Pakhtunkhwa for PTI is just merely a rubber stamp. Is it what you are saying?
Well, that's what I believe about it, because he can't go against its own leadership. His leadership, I mean, whatever he's doing in KPK, it is under the influence of the leadership, and the decisions which are being made, of course, they are being made with the confidence which he is gaining after meeting with the former leadership of the PTI. So this is how KPK is being run right now.
Okay,
and when we talk about they safeguarding their own backyard, it actually gives them more strength to focus on their possessions which are leading towards federal itself. That is why I'm saying it is a point of concern,
right,
especially owing to the fact when Pakistan wants the stability, economic
right,
stability,
Daniel wants to
and
add
political
something.
stability.
I'll come back to you, Faisal. Yes, Daniel.
As far as Faisal, I agree with you on safeguarding their backyard, and I think this is the CM's individual decision, because if it was up to Imran Khan, he's least bit bothered regarding whatever's happening in KPK. All he wants is chaos and protest. But I agree with you that the CM will go to the last extent to safeguard his government, or what you call his backyard.
But sorry, Sana, but don't you think that this is the same impulse that we have seen since PTI actually resigned from the parliament, that there are people who are going to ooh and ah every time there is a move that is made? I mean, dissolving the assemblies, removing themselves from the parliament, but in the end, it never works out. All is a product of accident. Right?
Well, absolutely, I agree with you. It hasn't worked out in the past, and obviously, but the CM, as far as individually his mind is concerned, he is going to go to the last resort to somehow safeguard his government or his position in the government. he's not going to jeopardize it.
Right, Faisal, I'll actually come back to you with a clarification that is due for quite some time. But since Naab has been waiting for a while, so I'm going to go to her before I come back to you. Naab, the discussion, especially with regards to where we stand with the opposition parties, is important. Not just in particular if we talk about what's happening with the opposition alliance at the moment, but we always also talk about how the opposition needs to be strong for a strong democracy as well. And if we talk about the parliament, it is a strength of the parliament as well to have a strong opposition, along with, of course, the parliamentarians and the decision makers sitting together as well. So I want to understand if the perspective here is to let people be, if there is no real understanding on ground, then isn't the question to create that understanding?
And Nayab, if you can allow me to actually supplement the question, I actually wanted to ask you a question related to, there are personalities within People's Party, because People's Party, when it comes to People's Party, it is known for, its reconciling politics, and there are names as well that are accepted on the both sides, on PMLN side and at the PTI side as well. I'm talking about Nadeem Afzal Chand, I'm talking about Kaira Saab, and there are several other names that are having huge respect within any political side we talk about in Pakistan. So don't you think that right now they have the right people, and People's Party, if of course given a go ahead from the government side and the leading party PMLN, then they will play their role very effectively, and some kind of conciliation can be restored in Pakistan?
Right. So I think to the first question, in terms of having a strong opposition, I think the most important issue over here is that we need to understand what we mean in a parliamentary democracy to have a strong opposition. And I think that when we say strong opposition, we do not mean oppositional forces that only create chaos and agitation. The whole point of having a strong opposition is that they should play a vital role in parliament, in parliamentary procedures. So, for example, while key debates are happening in the parliament with regards to the budget, with regards to key legislation, with regards to policy matters, that is what we mean when we say a strong opposition. And I think that the problem with the PTI is that they do not understand the world inside the parliament, which we saw when they were in government as well, because we saw them in the same sort of street agitational mode that they were in when they were in government as well. And there wasn't that much focus on parliamentary procedure and how, no matter whether you hate the other side, although ideally you shouldn't, you have to sit with them, you have to debate things out. So I think that the whole concept of a strong opposition is completely sort of turned on its head when it comes to the PTI, because I don't think that it's just about street agitation and reactionary politics. I think that in fact ends up weakening the parliament, as we've seen in the past 2 months. They have not played the role of a strong opposition, but just of agents of chaos who have stopped parliamentary procedures and proceedings from happening. And I do see that going on, and I think that at the end of the day, they're going to become inconsequential, as the others also mentioned. And I'm not too concerned about their sort of street agitational politics as well, because at the end of the day, the party in itself is divided into so many different factions. And this is not what a strong opposition looks like. A strong opposition is united, and a strong opposition plays its role inside the parliament as well. With regards to the second question, if I understood it correctly, it was meant to ask whether people who are acceptable to both sides should be selected for positions or roles inside government. That's what it meant. So I think that is something that is under consideration in the party, as we spoke about it before as well, that we do have 5 years, and 5 years are never static. There are different options that are in front of the Pakistan People's Party as well on whether to at some point, join the government, whether not to. So I think that this is sort of like a little bit of a premature discussion, but I think that the party is aware of the fact that there are a lot of, well-respected names which will be acceptable to the other side as well. And absolutely, it is something that should be looked at and will be looked at.
Nayab, can we say that if not being part of the cabinet in shape of minister or ministerial sort of position, we can say can we see few of the People's Party leaders that are accepted everywhere as being advisor to Prime Minister in coming days?
I think it's all that, things that the party leadership will look at depending on how they want to proceed. I do think that, I think it's very interesting actually that people don't understand sort of post kind of this polarizing discourse that the PTI has started in politics. They don't really realize that one of the key jobs of politicians is actually to sit together, and that a lot of politicians do actually accept and respect each other. So I think that this is a tradition that should be carried forward, and you can absolutely expect that once the dialogue happens, we can see things headed that way.
Right. Daniel, with regards to, especially when we talk about economic reforms, and earlier you mentioned that your perspective with regard to the president's speech was in terms of reconciliation with what's going on in Balochistan and within the provinces as well. So I want to understand regarding both these important issues, the issues of security and the issues of economic recovery in Pakistan, how much of these decisions and the direction that the government is taking is also being done in reconciliation with political parties such as the PPP?
Well, as far as the economic reforms is concerned, other than the privatization of state institutions, I believe, like PIA and Karachi Steel Mill, I believe that PPP is on the same page with PMLN. And as far as these two, also a few other state-owned enterprises concerned, which are constantly causing losses on that, so PPP and PMLN definitely have to brainstorm and debate, and they have to collectively find a solution. Otherwise, though, I believe there's a consensus on as to how to move forward, because there are very few options. And like in the manifesto of PMLN, they spoke about agriculture reform, and I don't think that, and this is one thing that we can do indigenously. As far as our agriculture is concerned, we don't need any foreign support in that. With very little input, the government can get a lot more output. Similarly, the other reforms that are possible right now at a micro level, I don't believe that there's any sort of difference of opinion with PPP as far as these things are concerned.
Daniel Sab, can we say that there are, of course, there are concerns about the privatization of steel mills and PIA, but in the larger interest of the people of Pakistan and to have the country moving forward, can we say that People's Party would, right at the end, of course, say yes to whatever the reforms are taking place?
PPP would definitely say, although I'm not a representative of PPP, Nayab can tell us better, but they would definitely sport reasoning and logic, and they'll definitely, when sitting on the table and when the debate is being done, they will not ignore reasoning and logic. And if this is what logic calls for, this is what they'll do.
Nayab, your response, please.
No, absolutely. I think that it's not just about acceptance. It is about dialogue. So I think we put forward a very, very clear manifesto when it came to economic policy. We were the first ones to put out our manifesto among all political parties during the elections. We've had a steady track record of what kind of economic vision we have. President Zardari has mentioned in his speech today very, very concrete steps regarding, the economic challenges. So I think that we do have a particular vision, and I do think, of course, the PMLN has its own particular vision, and anything, like he mentioned, it will be about choosing the best option, considering the situation at hand.
Right. Thank you very much, Nayab, for joining us, and thank you, Daniel, for being part of the discussion as well. Before I continue, Faisal, I just wanted to clarify one thing. You mentioned the Interior Minister in particular, and I wanted to clarify whether you meant that as the ministry he's representing or the individual.
No, obviously, when of course we are talking about the internal security of Pakistan, and internally, if there are some of the parties joining hands and coming towards the federal, of course, Interior Minister is the one who is going to make sure welfare of the people on ground, and of course the law and order security situation of Pakistanis at large. So that is why I think Interior Minister would be of course looking after that.
Yes, Farooq, you want to add
Right.
something?
I just wanted to point out that while we keep on talking about the possibility of dialogue between political parties, remember that there are two things. Earlier it was said that perhaps I thought that I was also included in that assertion, that somehow I agree that PTI is agents of chaos. I don't think so. I think what PTI is going through is called PTSD. And in that state of mind, when you are traumatized or when you have actually self-inflicted trauma, then you make bad choices and you keep on doing that. At this moment, they are beyond reason. But my concern is that there is a reason, Sana, why we keep on having this musical chairs of power. Every 3-4 years, somebody actually comes and tries to bring down a government, and then another government comes, and then we have the same cycle. And that is because of the systemic problems within our political system, our structure of governance. And that is where we have to actually try to find out solutions that can be found. How? If you remember, Raza Rabbani Saab once used to talk about the need for grand national dialogue. What did it mean? It meant not only within political class, but between political class and then your judiciary, your armed forces, your other institutions, intelligence per se, your media as well, and eventually business community too. You have to find a way to ensure that whenever there is government, there won't be conspiracies, right? The other political parties will not find systemic flaws to actually bring down a government. And that is how you ensure some kind of stability. So my concern is that if you are, and by the way, a dialogue between federation and federating units, and then federating units in districts also, without that kind of comprehensive approach, Sana, we keep on wasting time, because today even if you boo Maulana Fazlur Rahman or PTI for that matter, or whatever party it is, in the end what happens? In the end you are back to basics. You're back to square one, and then somebody else will emerge. If PTI actually finds reasoning or becomes reasonable, some other insurgent party will come and totally take this system hostage.
Absolutely. We're going to now move on to our next segment, which takes a look at the security threats emerging from Afghanistan, especially with regards to terrorist safe havens, and of course the US response to this matter as well, urging the Afghan Taliban to fulfill their commitments and to protect their territory being used against any others. And Faisal, this is of course not the first time that Pakistan has put forward this. This is not the first time that the US has also asked the Afghan Taliban regime to pull their commitments, but the US has also emphasized this time around that it is in continuous conversation with Pakistan with regard to this matter, and has supported Pakistan's fight against terrorism. What does that mean in terms of how this relationship will transpire on ground?
Yes, and now obviously when we talk about this coming out from American side, I think it should be received with happiness that finally they have actually started thinking seriously about whatever.
Do you think that they were not before?
They were not that serious. I mean, we have been shouting out loud even in our show as well since a long time that they were the ones who actually had that agreement with the Taliban in Doha. In Doha Accord, they affirmed that of course the land of Afghanistan will never be used against any of the neighboring countries or any other countries for the terrorism purposes. And now of course Pakistan is facing that. And if we talk about of course Americans stating it now, I think it is the fact which has been highlighted by Pakistan again and again. And once more, there is something I would like to highlight here, that now everyone is considering that Pakistan's war on terrorism, yes, it is Pakistan's war on terrorism, but when we talk about ISIS Khorasan, when we talk about all of these miscreants, they are not only a threat for Pakistan, but they are a threat for throughout the world, because this is the training ground. This is where ISIS Khorasan would be training the terrorists. And we know that in past, in Europe, in Americas, everywhere, activities were being taken where somehow, somewhere down the line, people from Afghanistan, they were involved in it. And now is the time to settle the scores so that in future we don't see anything taking place throughout the world, and of course in Pakistan as well. So Pakistan is not only fighting war to safeguard itself, but is fighting a war to safeguard the whole world, because ISIS Khorasan is an equally threat to the whole world. And I think world must stand with Pakistan at this hour, as Pakistan is fighting this war.
Right. Farooq, will there be a change in the responses that we've been seeing from the Afghan Taliban side?
Because of the American pressure? Really? You expect me to answer that? They don't seem to see any reason. Why would they listen to America, right? I think that we were accused of being the most influential force in the region, and we were accused that they listen to us. They don't. They don't even listen to their own leaders. So why would they listen to the Americans?
So they were willing to go to war again?
Sorry?
So they would be willing to go to war again?
Against whom?
Against the US?
I don't think that the US is not present here now, right?
Not right now, but there is no pressure for any such possibility in the future.
I don't think. I think that the only difference between Al Qaeda, or for that matter ISIS, and Taliban is that they are tied to a land, right? They might actually attack Pakistan, they might actually export terrorism to their immediate neighbors, but they can't actually go beyond the region because A, they don't have the capacity, B, they don't have the incentive to do something of that sort, right? If the US comes back to the region, perhaps they can start attacking them, but there isn't any possibility of that sort. Remember, it is very easy to get out of Afghanistan. It is very difficult to come back. Russia could not manage it after its withdrawal, even if it would one day want to actually come back to Afghanistan and police it. But it can't, because there are other great powers sitting next to Afghanistan, right? It is a very complicated region. And believe me, it warms the cockles of my heart when our American peers actually see our point of view and they agree with us. But I have to actually cite an Urdu, a verse, and I'm not even going to bother to translate it. कि मेरे कत्ल के बाद उसने जफा से तौबा हाय ज़ूद पशेमा का पशेमा होना, right? And now you see these problems. Why couldn't you see our problems or our point of view for the past 20 years when we were your partners and we kept on urging you to see reason and understand what we are talking about?
Right. Thank you, Farooq. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us. That's all that we have from the show. We'll now see you tomorrow.